there's a really high chance that you have been told wrong information about the most efficient way to grind your crafting. And in this video, I'm going to explain what you've been told and why it's wrong and what a better way of doing it would be. Now, I have seen a lot of people say what the quickest way to grind various types of crafting is, and it is super great that they want to share this information. I've been specifically looking at armoring, and I've been told multiple times what the most resource efficient way of doing this is. The problem is, it is wrong. There's so many YouTubers that are spreading information that's wrong. While their hearts are in the right place, they've simply taken basic information on face value and regurgitated it on their videos. Now, I've been quite reluctant to share this video because once a strategy is known and everyone's doing it, then it generally becomes less viable. So if you're a subscriber and one of the first to see this video, then fill your boots. If you don't subscribe and you're late to the party, then this may not be as cost effective as it could be, but it will be viable regardless as long as your aim is to gather and not buy the materials. So let me explain what the current message is, why they're telling you it's the best way, and then I'll explain to you why it's wrong and what the better way is. First things first, let me invite you to hit that subscribe button. Subscribing means you'll stay up to date with all the latest news, tips, tricks and guides for New World. Now, if you don't want to subscribe, then that's fine, but instead hit that thumbs up icon because YouTube will recommend my content when it feels like it's appropriate for you. So what's the current idea about the most resource efficient way of crafting? People will tell you to craft tier 2 items. So in this example, let's look at the tier 2 gauntlets. So in order to craft these, you'll need 4 iron, 4 leather and 1 linen, and you'll earn yourself 108 XP towards your armoring skill. Now when you compare that to the tier 3 gauntlets, you'll earn 270 XP, which is 250% more XP than the tier 2. However, you require 300% more iron to craft these. So the logic here is that tier 2 are more efficient on resources. When you look at the two items, both of these use exactly the same amount of leather and exactly the same amount of linen, so we're pushing that to one side for the minute. Now, on face value, this makes perfect sense, but when you look at the bigger picture, things look a whole lot different. And the reality of the situation is, this is not the more efficient option. So what I'll do to begin with is scale up the numbers a little bit, in part because it makes the numbers a little bit more obvious and easier to work with, and also because we're leveling up our crafting and we're going to be needing to craft thousands of items anyway. So let's start with a hypothetical 1,200 iron ingots. Right, this will be the starting point. And the reason that I picked this number is because it just makes things a whole lot easier to work with. So initially, I'm going to work on the basis that you've gathered all the materials yourself, but it's up to you how you spend your money. This method still holds up either way, but the cost of the materials may change depending on various factors, including balance changes by Amazon. So given the numbers, if you had 1,200 iron, you could make yourself a total of 300 iron plate gauntlets. And this would net you a sweet 32,400 experience. If you were to go down the route and taking that same 1,200 iron and convert it into steel, you could earn yourself 51,030 XP. So how is it possible to be earning so much more XP using steel plate gauntlets when you're using exactly the same starting materials, when we know from what other YouTubers have told us about the best way is, and from the logic that we looked at earlier? I'll tell you, it's the flux. So when you use sand flux, you acquire 14% more materials on average. But when you use the shell dust flux, you acquire 64% more materials. And using obsidian, you acquire 89% more materials. Now, I just want to highlight right now, those numbers I've given you are specific to me because you actually get an increased amount of additional item craft based on your level. And because my smelting skill is 161, mine's a little bit higher. So the way that that works is that when I get to level 200, I will get an extra 20% on that. So your mileage may vary depending on your ability. Ultimately, it will be around this sort of figure and the point will still stand. Now, if you want to check this yourself, it's super simple. All you need to do is uncheck the owned items box and you can select any of the fluxes that you want to make a comparison and see what percentage that you'll get. So Blackout, I hear you cry. You're scamming us because obsidian flux is a bottleneck and the chances are it's going to need to be purchased and therefore it carries a value. Absolutely. Yes, it does carry a value and I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. But this stuff you can obtain without purchasing. Personally, I purchase it because right now it's cost effective for me to do so. But let's look at the bigger picture. We don't want to just take things at face value. While we're busy arguing about the iron and the flux, we're neglecting one important factor here. Well, two factors. The leather and the linen. These two are overlooked because regardless of whether you're crafting iron or steel gauntlets, the leather and the linen amount stays the same. So it stands to reason that we don't need to worry about it. We have to gather it and buy it all the same, right? Wrong. We need to consider the opportunity cost of each of these resources in the final piece in the puzzle. If we were to use iron, we'd craft 300 items using 1,200 coarse leather and 300 linen. And based on the current prices on my server, we're looking at a value of about 528 coins. Now, if we were to use steel, we'd craft far fewer items and we'd use less linen and less leather. We'd only craft 189 items, meaning the value of the leather and linen used comes to around 332 coins. This is a difference of 195 coins. So that money can be used to offset the cost of the flux by about 50%. Now, if you wanted to remain completely cost zero, you could opt to sell some of the excess crafted steel, and while you may not get as much XP fast, you'll still get more XP than if you were to craft the iron versions. And one final tip, and I say this with the small caveat that I've not explored the true value of doing this just yet, it is possible to convert 20 tier 5 refining components of any type into 15 obsidian flux for the cost of just 500 faction tokens. To put this in perspective, this is just higher than the reward that you get from doing a faction mission in First Light. This means if you have any tier 5 refining components, then you can make use of them for a fee. And as I say, I've not investigated the true gold value of the tokens yet, but if you subscribe, then you'll be the first to know when I do. All you need to do is come across to your faction leader, go down to your 4th tier in whichever faction you're in, and you'll be looking at the Masterwork Material Converter. As you can see, this is 500 and 0 coins. Now this might not be cost effective, however, market prices do fluctuate and you may find that there are some tier 5 items which are, shall we say, not as much in demand, but there is a high supply of them. Now I've stockpiled a lot of tier 5 items and I'm going to use this as an opportunity to investigate this. When I purchased these tier 5 items, they were very, very, very cheap. Now, if the price goes up of them, then I've got an opportunity to sell them back, but they're there basically for me to practice. So my final tip will be to keep on gathering and don't take things on face value. And if you want to apply this principle to any area of crafting, then you can do. This is not so much a guide on what specifically you need to do for armor. It's more about looking at the bigger picture and seeing what things that you should consider when you're determining what to craft. For example, with the outfitting station, you can apply these same principles to, say, the linen hand wraps and the sateen gloves. The principle still works. However, due to the increased amount of resource requirement that you need for each of these, you need 4 pieces of cloth in each instance. While crafting the sateen over the linen, you do get more XP, but in the case of armoring, you get more overall XP from the forge. So I hope this has helped somebody. And yeah, fill your boots while those views are really low. And this is one of the benefits of subscribing to me, because I do not have a lot of followers. This information may be slow to get out. So enjoy this while it is still viable, because there will be a point when people realize this on a bigger scale and the price of flux will just go through the roof. So I apologize to anybody who's using this already. This is the first step to ruining an economy in a game. So I apologize. Anyway, I will catch you in the next one.